Hello, in this video I'm going to be talking about the connections between the Aztec Empire and Atlantis. This video is going to be partially a continuation of two other videos that I've already posted previously, but it's also going to lead into a new topic as well. First of all, I discussed in my previous videos that human sacrifice may have first of all been practiced in Atlantis, and a stronger conclusion, a kind of speculative conclusion that I made was that Atlantis may have actually been the creator of the practice of human sacrifice, and then it spread out across the world, these different cultures. And we know at least that animal sacrifice was an important ritual of Atlantis. This isn't just my interpretation. This is actually specifically mentioned, and it's one of the temple rituals that the kings of Atlantis participated in every 5 to 6 years. And so animal sacrifice and human sacrifice have often gone together, with animal sacrifice actually being an alternative or a substitute to a practice of human sacrifice that existed at an earlier time in that civilization. For example, when God told Abraham to not sacrifice his son Isaac, that is considered by some scholars to be a myth explaining the substitution of human sacrifice with animal sacrifice. And so we also know that human sacrifice was a really widespread custom in ancient times, and it was the farther back we go in time, the more it was prevalent. So the idea is Atlantis being a civilization that existed really at the beginning of time, that was a time when human sacrifice could have been much, much more widespread and almost a universal custom. But this is really just an overview and a review of what I mentioned in that video. If you want to learn about it in more detail, then please watch that video. Now, in another video, I also mentioned the idea that the people of Atlantis, obviously we know that Atlantis was destroyed in a great cataclysm and that they were just completely wiped out to the extent where we almost lost all historical memory of this civilization, except for the fact that ancient Egypt possibly preserved that story. And so they were almost completely forgotten. And it's mentioned in Plato's narrative that Atlantis, before its destruction, became immoral and lost its virtue. And the general interpretation of that and Atlantis' destruction is that Atlantis was being punished for its immorality, that their immorality was the cause, so to speak, of their punishment by the gods. But I argued that in the previous video that it could have been the other way around, where Atlantis' decline in morality was a consequence of their foreknowledge that they were facing this inevitable doom and that was coming before them, right? Because it's a given fact that if human beings, the basis of morality is that good deeds will be rewarded and bad deeds will be punished. And so if the Atlantean people just came to realize that they would all suffer this cataclysmic doom in the not too long future, it's very easy to see how morality and social cohesion and virtue could just completely collapse. That would just be an almost inevitable consequence of the knowledge of this future destruction. And so I'm arguing here that cause and consequence has been mixed up. And so in this video, I'm going to be kind of combining these two ideas into like a synthesis, so to speak. We know that, for example, in the Aztec Empire, the people of the Aztec Empire practiced human sacrifice because they believed that if they didn't sacrifice and provide this blood to the gods, that the gods would punish them by not making the sun rise, and that the whole cosmic order would just be undermined and collapsed, and their whole world would come to a crushing halt. And so the Aztecs believed that the Aztecs were wrong in believing this, right? Because their doom did not come from the sun failing to rise, but from other people who ended up invading their area and just conquering them. You could argue that that's an equivalent situation of their universe coming to an end, but it's two kind of different things. So I'm arguing here and making the connection to the ideas discussed in the previous slide that if Atlantis foresaw their own destruction, then we know that another civilization in the past that believed that they were going to be destroyed in the future partook in the ritual of human sacrifice to forestall and to prevent or to delay that event. And so the idea is that if the people of Atlantis had that similar fear, which actually ended up being proven to be correct, it is very much possible that they could have had the same ritualistic cultural response to that collective fear and sense of foreboding that they must have felt right before their doom and their destruction, the day of their doom. Because we generally can kind of, human nature is the same whether right now, 500 years ago, 12,000 years ago. We all fear the same things, and a collective civilizational catastrophe in which everybody is completely wiped out and the whole world comes to an end is something that I'm sure most people, if that were to actually happen and have a good chance of happening, would be scared of, would really genuinely be scared about. And so the idea here is that Atlantis could have had the same response to the same fears as the Aztecs. And given the fact that we already know that the Atlanteans practiced animal sacrifice in a ritualistic manner, not just in a kind of a as a hunting ritual, but in a very ritualistic manner, the Atlanteans practiced human sacrifice. So the possibility, I mean, animal sacrifice. So the possibility that they participated in human sacrifice, I believe, just becomes much greater since they were facing the same fears that the Aztec Empire, the people of the Aztec Empire participated in, or the same fears that they had. And beyond the question of whether Atlantis could have practiced human sacrifice, because that's really a discussion that was already um, gone over in previous videos. Let's kind of move on to a new topic now. And it's this kind of concept in this name of Aztlan, which is the mythical homeland of the Aztec people. And so, could Aztlan be Atlantis? And that's the major question here. They sound very similar, but then again, there's many things in this, many words in this, in the, there are many words that sound very similar to each other and have nothing in common. Aztlan was said to be the Aztec homeland, and it was the place where they had migrated away from to reestablish their new homeland, which was in Tenochtitlan, which is present-day Mexico City. And the land of Aztlan was said to have been a marshy island situated in the middle of the lake, whereas Atlantis was described by Plato as having been an island with provision for all sorts of animals, both of which live in lakes and marshes and rivers. So we have this commonality in Atlantis and Aztlan. And and said to have been a marshy island is not just this random guess, but it's actually stated in the Aztec historical or mythical records as was written down just immediately after the conquest of Mexico. And so the view of Aztlan is also very similar because for 5 centuries, popular imagination has speculated about the location of the legendary Aztlan. If we substituted us as Atlantis for Aztlan, that would be exactly the interpretation of this myth of Atlantis. People have speculated, and it's been a very prominent aspect of popular imagination. And also, some people, it's stated in this website that some people refer to Aztlan as a concept, not an actual place that it ever existed. Again, if we substitute Atlantis for Aztlan, that's exactly what Atlantis is. People debate whether it actually existed or not. And so there seems to be at least some basis of comparison for between Aztlan and Atlantis. And if that were true, then we could actually explain the origin of human sacrifice. Human sacrifice, at least as is practiced on this vast scale, as a critical element of that culture's traditions, ultimately can be said to originate from this collective fear and terror of this impending disaster that is to come. And whereas the Aztec people were not actually warranted in believing that a natural disaster would ultimately destroy their way of life, The people of Atlantis were very much justified in their fears if they had those fears, and hence they might have responded to that cultural collective terror in a similar way as the Aztec Empire. And much of what I'm saying in this video is rather speculative, but it's just a kind of starting point to see a possible connection between two apparently very different cultures.